I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the sink. Mom's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. "Jordan, honey, I'm worried about you," she had said over our weekly Sunday brunch. "You're not getting any younger, and I just want to see you settled before." I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the memory of her concerned eyes. At 35, I'd always thought I had plenty of time. But seeing the fear in Mom's face, the unspoken dread of leaving me alone in the world, it shook me to my core. A gentle knock on the door startled me. "Jor, you okay in there?" It was Nicole, my younger sister. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Yeah, I'm fine." Nicole raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. "Mom got to you, didn't she?" I nodded, unable to find the words. "Come on," she said, grabbing my hand. "Let's grab a coffee. You look like you need it." 20 minutes later, we were seated at our favorite cafe, steaming lattes in front of us. Nicole leaned forward, her eyes full of understanding. "Look, I know Mom means well, but you can't let her pressure you into something you're not ready for." I sighed, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "It's not just that, Nick. You should have seen her face. She's scared, and I can't help but feel like I'm letting her down." "You're not letting anyone down," Nicole insisted. "You have a great career, your own place, you're doing just fine. But what if she's right?" I blurted out, "What if I've been so focused on work that I've missed out on finding someone? What if—" "Stop right there," Nicole cut me off. "You haven't missed out on anything. But if you really want to explore your options, why don't we start small? There's a speed dating event at the community center next week. Why don't you give it a shot?" I nearly choked on my latte. "Speed dating? Are you serious?" Nicole grinned. "Deadly. Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" "I could die of embarrassment," I offered. "Or," she countered, "you could meet someone interesting. At the very least, it'll give Mom something to smile about." I hesitated, but the image of Mom's worried face flashed through my mind again. "Fine," I conceded, "but you owe me big time." "Deal," Nicole said, raising her mug in a mock toast. "Now, let's talk about what you're going to wear." The next week flew by in a blur of work deadlines and increasingly panicked phone calls with Nicole. Before I knew it, I was standing outside the community center, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. "You can do this," I muttered to myself, smoothing down the new dress Nicole had insisted I buy. "It's just a few hours. No big deal." I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The room was already buzzing with activity, filled with nervous laughter and the clink of glasses. I scanned the crowd, feeling overwhelmed. First time, I turned to find a man about my age smiling at me. He had kind eyes and an easygoing demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, managing a small laugh. He shrugged. "Takes one to know one. I'm Brad." "Jordan," I replied, shaking his offered hand. "Well, Jordan," he said, gesturing towards the room, "what do you say we face this madness together?" For the first time that evening, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't such a bad idea after all. "Lead the way," I said, following Brad into the crowd, unaware that this simple decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change my life forever. I stood in front of my closet, staring at a sea of muted colors and practical work attire. Nicole's words from our shopping trip yesterday echoed in my mind. "Jordan, you're gorgeous. It's time to let the world see it." With a deep breath, I reached for the vibrant red blouse we'd bought. It felt daring, almost rebellious. As I slipped it on, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a software engineer. I saw a woman. The office was abuzz with energy as I walked in. Heads turned, and I felt a flutter of self-consciousness. "Wow, Jordan!" my colleague Sarah exclaimed. "You look amazing." "What's the occasion?" I felt my cheeks warm. "No occasion, just trying something new." Sarah grinned. "Well, it suits you. You should dress like this more often." As the day progressed, I found myself standing taller, smiling more. The compliments kept coming, each one boosting my confidence a little higher. By lunchtime, I was riding a wave of newfound self-assurance when my phone buzzed. It was Mom. "Jordan, honey," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "I hope you haven't forgotten about dinner tonight. I've invited the Thompsons. Their son, Mark, is visiting from Chicago. He's a doctor, you know." My stomach dropped. "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm not interested in being set up." But sweetheart, Mark is such a nice young man. Just give him a chance. For me? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her expectations. Fine, Mom, I'll be there. The rest of the day passed in a blur of coding and meetings. As I drove to Mom's house that evening, my earlier confidence began to waver. What was I thinking? Trying to change myself? Mom greeted me at the door, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Oh, Jordan, you look lovely. Before I could respond, she ushered me into the living room where the Thompsons sat with their son. Mark stood up, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Dinner was a painful affair. Mark droned on about his medical practice while Mom beamed at us, clearly envisioning wedding bells. I pushed my food around my plate, feeling more out of place with each passing minute. As Mom cleared the dishes, Mrs. Thompson leaned in. So, Jordan, do you have any plans to settle down? A career is nice, but there's nothing like having a family. I felt a surge of anger. Actually, I'm quite happy with my life as it is. The room fell silent. Mom returned, her face a mask of disappointment. Jordan, why don't you help me in the kitchen? Once we were alone, she turned to me. Honey, I'm just trying to help. You're not getting any younger, and stop it, Mom, I snapped, surprising us both. I'm tired of you trying to fix me. There's nothing wrong with my life. Tears welled in her eyes. I just want you to be happy. I am happy, I insisted, but the words felt hollow. The drive home was a blur of conflicting emotions. As I walked into my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. How'd it go with Mom's setup? I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Disaster, I typed back. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Nick. Her response was immediate. Come over tomorrow. I have an idea. The next morning, I found myself at Nicole's doorstep, still feeling raw from the previous night's events. Okay, Nicole said as soon as I walked in, her eyes gleaming with determination. We're going to that speed dating event. I groaned. Nick, I don't think. No arguments, she cut me off. You tried Mom's way, now we're doing this my way. As I looked at my sister's resolute face, I realized I had a choice to make. I could retreat back into my comfortable, predictable life, or I could take a leap into the unknown. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, I nodded. All right, let's do it. Little did I know that decision would set me on a path that would change everything. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as I stepped inside, my heart pounding. Nicole gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before disappearing into the crowd. I was on my own. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our speed dating event. The coordinator's voice rang out. You'll have 5 minutes with each partner. When you hear the bell, move to the next table. Ready? Begin. I sat down at my first table, facing a man with a receding hairline and a forced smile. Hi, I'm Steve, he said, his eyes darting around the room. Jordan, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The next few encounters blurred together, a parade of awkward small talk and feigned interest. By the 4th round, I was ready to bolt. Then I saw him. He was tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that put me at ease instantly. As he sat down, I noticed calluses on his hands, a working man's hands. I'm Brad, he said, his voice warm and deep. Jordan, I replied, feeling a flutter in my stomach. So, Jordan, he leaned in, his eyes twinkling, what brings a beautiful woman like you to a place like this? I laughed, surprised by his directness. Would you believe my sister dragged me here? Brad grinned. I'd believe it. My buddy did the same to me. Said I needed to get out there. We fell into easy conversation, discussing our jobs, our families, our dreams. Before I knew it, the bell rang. Time's up, I said, feeling a pang of disappointment. Brad hesitated, then quickly scribbled something on a napkin. I know we're supposed to wait until the end, but here's my number. I'd love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime. As he moved to the next table, I clutched the napkin, a mix of excitement and trepidation washing over me. The rest of the event passed in a blur. As soon as it ended, I found Nicole waiting by the door. Well, she asked, eyebrows raised. I showed her the napkin. I met someone. Nicole squealed, drawing curious glances. Details now. We headed to a nearby cafe where I recounted my meeting with Brad. Nicole listened intently, her eyes sparkling with excitement. He sounds perfect, Jor, she said. When are you going to call him? I hesitated. I don't know, Nick. What if? No what ifs, she cut me off. You're calling him. Right now. Before I could protest, Nicole had snatched my phone and dialed the number. "It's ringing," she mouthed, handing it back to me. "Hello?" Brad's voice came through the speaker. "Hi, Brad. It's Jordan from the speed dating event." "Jordan, I'm glad you called. I was hoping we could grab that coffee." We made plans for the following evening, and as I hung up, I felt a mix of excitement and terror. The next day, I stood in front of the mirror, scrutinizing my outfit. The red blouse from before felt too bold now. I changed into a soft blue sweater, then back to the red blouse. By the time I settled on an outfit, I was already running late. I rushed to the cafe, my nerves frayed. As I burst through the door, I saw Brad sitting at a corner table, looking up expectantly. Our eyes met, and he smiled that warm smile that had captivated me the night before. "Jordan," he said, standing to greet me, "I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." "Never," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. As we sat down, Brad reached across the table and took my hand. "I have a confession to make," he said, his expression serious. "I've never done anything like this before. But there's something about you, Jordan. I can't explain it, but I feel like I've known you my whole life." I felt a lump form in my throat. This was moving fast, too fast. But as I looked into Brad's earnest eyes, I realized I felt the same inexplicable connection. "I feel it too," I whispered. Brad's face lit up, and in that moment I knew my life was about to change forever. What I didn't know was whether that change would lead to happiness or heartbreak. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of love and laughter. Brad and I had grown closer than I ever thought possible, our lives intertwining like vines. As I stood in front of the mirror on my wedding day, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the hesitant, career-focused Jordan. In her place stood a bride, radiant with joy and hope. "You look beautiful, honey," Mom said, her eyes glistening with tears as she adjusted my veil. I turned to face her, my heart swelling with emotion. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." She pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so happy for you, Jordan. Brad is a wonderful man." As we broke apart, a shadow crossed her face. "I just wish his family could be here to share this day." I felt a pang of sadness. Brad's strained relationship with his parents had been a source of tension throughout our engagement. They'd refused to attend the wedding, citing irreconcilable differences with their son's life choices. "We're his family now, Mom," I said, squeezing her hand. "That's all that matters." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. As Brad and I exchanged vows, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the small gathering of friends and family erupted in cheers. At the reception, Nicole cornered me by the punch bowl, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "So, Mrs. Bradford," she teased, "how does it feel to be a married woman?" I laughed, still giddy from the day's events. "Honestly, it feels amazing." Nicole's expression softened. "I'm happy for you, Jor. But—" she hesitated, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. "Are you sure about Brad? I mean, with his family situation and all." I felt a flicker of annoyance. "Brad can't help his family, Nick. He's a good man." I know," she said, holding up her hands in surrender. "I just worry about you, that's all." Before I could respond, Brad appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Everything okay here, ladies?" I leaned into him, pushing away my doubts. "Everything's perfect." As the night wore on, I found myself watching Brad interact with my family. He was charming, attentive, everything I could have hoped for in a husband. Yet there was a nagging feeling I couldn't shake, a sense that something was off. Later, as we slow danced under the twinkling lights, I voiced my concerns. "Brad, are you sure you're okay with all this? With becoming part of my family?" He pulled back slightly, his brow furrowed. "Of course, Jordan. Why wouldn't I be? It's just... I know how hard it's been with your parents. I don't want you to feel like you're replacing them, or—" Brad cut me off with a kiss. "Your family is my family now," he said firmly. I couldn't be happier. His words should have reassured me, but instead, they sent a chill down my spine. There was an intensity in his eyes that I'd never seen before, a hunger that both thrilled and frightened me. As the reception wound down, Mom pulled me aside for one last moment alone. "Jordan, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I want you to have this." She pressed a small velvet box into my hands. Inside was a delicate gold locket, clearly an antique. "It's been in our family for generations," Mom explained. "I want you to have it now, to pass on to your own daughter someday." Tears welled in my eyes as I clasped the locket around my neck. Thank you, Mom. I'll treasure it always. As Brad and I drove away from the reception, waving goodbye to our loved ones, I fingered the locket, lost in thought. I was starting a new chapter of my life, filled with promise and love. But as I glanced at Brad's profile in the dim car light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was also leaving something behind. A part of myself I might never get back. Little did I know, this day marked not just the beginning of my marriage, but the start of a journey that would test the very foundations of everything I believed about love, family, and myself. The first year of marriage with Brad was like a dream. We settled into a cozy routine, our lives intertwining seamlessly. Every Sunday we'd visit Mom for dinner, and I watched with joy as Brad and Mom grew closer. He'd help her with household repairs, listen to her stories, and even started calling her Mom himself. One Sunday evening, as we were leaving Mom's house, Brad surprised me. "You know, Jordan, I've been thinking," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Maybe it's time we start thinking about having a family of our own." My heart skipped a beat. "Really? You want to have kids?" He nodded, pulling me close. "Seeing you with your mom, it makes me realize what I missed out on. I want to create that kind of love and warmth in our own home." I felt a rush of emotions, excitement, fear, love. "Oh, Brad," I whispered, burying my face in his chest. "I'd love that." The next few months were a whirlwind of planning and dreaming. We turned our spare room into a nursery, painted soft yellow with little ducks on the walls. Mom was over the moon, already knitting tiny booties and blankets. But as the months passed with no positive pregnancy test, the excitement began to wane. I started to feel the pressure, the disappointment in Brad's eyes each time I shook my head. The doctor's visits became more frequent, the tests more invasive. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bradford," the fertility specialist said one day, her voice gentle, "but it seems you have some complications that may make it difficult for you to conceive naturally." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Brad squeezed my hand, but I could feel the tension in his grip. That night, as we lay in bed, Brad turned to me. "Jordan, I've been thinking, what if we considered adoption?" I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "Adoption? Are you sure?" He nodded, his eyes earnest. "I know it's not what we planned, but think about it. We could give a child a loving home, a family. Isn't that what really matters?" I felt a surge of love for this man who continually surprised me with his compassion. "You're right," I said, leaning in to kiss him. "Let's do it." The adoption process was grueling. Mountains of paperwork, invasive home studies, and endless waiting. But through it all, Brad was my rock. He never wavered, never complained. His dedication only made me love him more. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the call. A baby girl, just 3 months old, needed a home. We rushed to the agency, our hearts pounding with anticipation. The moment they placed her in my arms, I knew. This was our daughter. I looked up at Brad, tears streaming down my face, and saw the same emotion mirrored in his eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently stroking her cheek. We named her Lily, after my grandmother. As we brought her home, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. Our little family was whole. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. But through it all, Brad was there, changing diapers, singing lullabies, and making midnight formula runs. One night, as I watched Brad gently rock Lily to sleep, I felt a twinge of unease. He was so perfect, so devoted. It almost seemed too good to be true. "Brad," I said softly, not wanting to wake Lily, "are you really okay with all this? With adopting, I mean. It's not what we originally planned." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with an intensity that took my breath away. "Jordan, this is everything I've ever wanted. You, Lily, our family. I wouldn't change a thing." His words should have reassured me, but instead they sent a chill down my spine. There was something in his voice, a desperation I'd never heard before. As he turned back to Lily, cooing softly, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Brad's devotion than met the eye. Little did I know, this moment of doubt was just the beginning. The foundation of our perfect life was about to be shaken to its core, and I would soon face a decision that would change everything. The call came at 3 a.m., jolting me from a fitful sleep. Mom's neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, her voice trembling, told me Mom had collapsed. By the time Brad and I reached the hospital, Mom was already in the ICU. Stroke, the doctor said, his face grim. The next 24 hours are critical. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Brad's arm around my waist was the only thing keeping me upright. She'll pull through, he whispered. Your mom's a fighter. But as the hours ticked by, hope dwindled. Mom's condition deteriorated rapidly. By nightfall, the doctor's expression had changed from grim to defeated. I'm sorry, he said softly. There's nothing more we can do. The words hit me like a physical blow. I crumpled into Brad's arms, my body racked with sobs. This couldn't be happening. Not Mom. Not now. As we entered Mom's room, the steady beep of machines filled the air. She looked so small, so fragile in that hospital bed. I took her hand, cold and limp, in mine. Mom, I choked out. Please don't leave me. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with effort. Jordan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. My sweet girl. I leaned in close, drinking in every word. I'm here, Mom. I'm right here. She squeezed my hand weakly. Be happy, sweetheart. That's all I ever wanted for you. Her eyes drifted to Brad, standing silently behind me. Take care of her, she murmured. Brad nodded solemnly. I promise, Mom, with everything I have. Mom's lips curved into a faint smile. Then with a soft sigh, she closed her eyes. The machines wailed as her heart stopped beating. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and exhaustion. Brad took charge of the funeral arrangements, handling everything with quiet efficiency. I moved through the motions like a ghost, barely able to function. The day of the funeral dawned bright and clear, a cruel contrast to the darkness in my heart. As I stood before the mirror, struggling to fasten the clasp of Mom's locket, Brad appeared behind me. Let me, he said gently, his fingers deftly securing the necklace. I met his eyes in the reflection. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. How to live without her? Brad turned me to face him, his hands on my shoulders. You're not alone, Jordan. I'm here. We'll get through this together. At the cemetery, I clutched Brad's hand like a lifeline as they lowered Mom's casket into the ground. Nicole stood on my other side, her daughter Maya pressed close to her leg. As people began to disperse, Brad squeezed my hand. I'll give you a moment alone, he said, moving away. I knelt by the fresh mound of earth, tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry, Mom, I whispered. I'm sorry I didn't spend more time with you. I'm sorry for all the things I never said. A hand on my shoulder startled me. I looked up to see Nicole, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. She knew, Jor, she said softly. Mom knew how much you loved her. As we walked back to the car, I noticed Brad deep in conversation with the funeral director. Their hushed tones and serious expressions sent a chill down my spine. Everything okay? I asked as Brad rejoined us. He nodded, a bit too quickly, just finalizing some details. That night, as I lay sleepless in bed, I heard Brad's voice from downstairs. He was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Need to move quickly. I caught snippets of his conversation. Before she suspects anything. My heart began to race. What was Brad up to? And why did I have the sinking feeling it had something to do with Mom's death? As I lay there, my mind spinning with questions and suspicions, I realized that my grief was slowly giving way to something else. A determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the path I was about to embark on would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I had chosen to spend my life with. The weeks following Mom's funeral were a blur of grief and paperwork. Brad had been my rock, handling everything from the estate lawyers to the endless stream of well-wishers. But as the fog of sorrow began to lift, I noticed something off about his behavior. It started with little things. Hushed phone calls that abruptly ended when I entered the room, furtive glances at his phone during dinner. But it was the day I caught him rifling through Mom's old files that my suspicions crystallized into something more sinister. What are you doing? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Brad jumped, guilt flashing across his face before he smoothed it into a sympathetic smile. Just organizing some papers for the lawyer, honey. Don't worry about it. But I did worry. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. When Brad's phone buzzed with a late-night text, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I waited until Brad left for work before sneaking into his home office. My hands shook as I booted up his computer, feeling like a thief in my own home. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A series of emails with a local real estate appraiser. My blood ran cold as I read the messages. Brad had been secretly getting Mom's house appraised. But why? We had agreed to keep it in the family, a place for Nicole and her daughter to live. Suddenly, a noise from downstairs made me jump. Brad's voice called out, "Jordan, you home?" Panic surged through me. I quickly closed the emails and shut down the computer, my heart pounding so loud I was sure Brad would hear it. "Up here!" I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Just tidying up a bit. That evening, over a dinner I could barely stomach, I decided to confront him. "Brad," I began, setting down my fork. "I need to ask you something." He looked up, his expression guarded. "What is it, honey?" "Why did you have Mom's house appraised?" The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then his features hardened. "How did you find out about that?" "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice trembling. "What matters is why you did it behind my back." Brad's jaw clenched. "I was trying to protect you, Jordan. We need to think about our future, about Lily's future. That house is worth a lot of money." "Protect me?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "By going behind my back? By betraying my trust?" "Don't be so dramatic," Brad snapped. "It's just business. Your mother would have wanted us to be financially secure." His words hit me like a physical blow. "My mother would have wanted us to honor her wishes," I shot back. "She wanted that house to stay in the family, for Nicole and Maya." Brad's eyes flashed with anger. "And what about our family? What about Lily? Don't we deserve a better life?" "Not at the expense of my sister and niece," I shouted, rising from my chair. "God, Brad, I don't even recognize you anymore. What happened to the man I married?" "He grew up," Brad snarled. "He realized that in this world you have to look out for yourself." As we glared at each other across the dinner table, I felt something inside me break. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. This wasn't the life I had envisioned for us. "I want you out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Pack your things and leave now." Brad's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. You have no idea what you're getting into." As he stormed out of the room, his last words sent a chill down my spine. What did he mean? What else was he hiding? That night, as I lay alone in our bed, I made a vow. I would uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. For Mom's memory, for Nicole and Maya, and for my own peace of mind, I would get to the bottom of Brad's deception. Little did I know, the truth would be far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The truth hit me like a freight train. As I sat in the lawyer's office, staring at the documents spread before me, I felt my world crumbling around me. Brad, the man I had loved and trusted, had been living a lie. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bradford," the lawyer said gently, "but it appears your husband has accrued a significant gambling debt over the past few years. He's been using your mother's house as collateral." My hands shook as I leafed through the papers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, borrowed against Mom's home. Our home. The home that was supposed to be a safe haven for Nicole and Maya. "How?" I choked out. "How could he do this?" The lawyer's sympathetic gaze did nothing to ease the pain. "I'm afraid it gets worse. There's evidence that Mr. Bradford may have, hastened your mother's passing to gain access to the property sooner." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk, fighting the urge to be sick. Brad hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed Mom's memory, her trust in him. And for what? For money to fuel his addiction? I left the office in a daze, my mind reeling. As I drove home, a cold determination settled over me. This ends now, I thought. Brad was waiting when I got home, his face a mask of false concern. "Where have you been, honey? I've been worried sick." I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I had ever been so blind. "It's over, Brad," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I know everything." His facade crumbled instantly. "Jordan, I can explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off. "How you gambled away our future. How you used my mother's house as your personal piggy bank. Or maybe you'd like to explain how you hastened her death." Brad's face went pale. That's not true. I loved your mother. I would never—" "Save it," I spat. "I want you out of this house and out of my life. Now." As Brad packed his things, casting desperate glances my way, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't the end I had envisioned for us, but it was the end we deserved. Once he was gone, I called Nicole. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice breaking. And bring Maya. I need you both." An hour later, we sat around Mom's old kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared so many family dinners. I told them everything. Brad's betrayal, the gambling, the threats to our home. Nicole reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Oh, Jor," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Maya, wise beyond her years, looked up at me with determination in her eyes. "We'll fix this, Aunt Jordan, together." Looking at their faces, my sister, my niece, my family, I felt a surge of strength. "You're right," I said. "We will fix this. This is our home, and no one is going to take it from us." Over the next few weeks, we formulated a plan. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to boost our income. Nicole started a small business from home, selling her handmade crafts online. Even Maya pitched in, offering to tutor younger kids in the neighborhood. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the weight of it all felt crushing. But every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of Nicole humming in the kitchen or Maya's laughter echoing through the halls, and I knew we were going to make it. 6 months later, we gathered around that same kitchen table. But this time, instead of bad news, we were celebrating. We had done it. We had paid off Brad's debts and saved our home. As I looked around at the faces of my true family, I felt Mom's presence stronger than ever. I fingered the locket around my neck, the one she had given me on my wedding day. "We did it, Mom," I whispered. "We kept your home. We kept our family together." Nicole raised her glass. "To Mom," she said, her eyes glistening. "And to us." "To us," Maya and I echoed. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Brad had betrayed us, but he had also unwittingly given us a gift, the chance to discover our own strength, our resilience, our love for each other. As we laughed and talked late into the night, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. This was home. This was family. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them together. I watched Wyatt's car disappear down the street, the familiar ache in my chest growing stronger with each passing second. My boy, always working so hard for us. I hobbled back inside, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. "Wyatt's gone, then?" Cora's voice drifted from the kitchen, cool and disinterested. "Yes, he just left," I replied, making my way to join her. "He said he'd call when he lands in Chicago." Cora sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up as I entered. "I'm sure he will." I lowered myself into a chair, wincing at the twinge in my hip. "I thought we could have breakfast together," I suggested, trying to keep my tone light. "I can whip up some pancakes." She finally looked at me, her expression unreadable. "No need, Lenora. I have errands to run." I watched as she stood, gathering her purse and keys. "But it's barely 8 o'clock. Surely you have time for a quick bite?" Cora sighed, her frustration evident. "I said I have errands. I don't need to explain myself to you." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in the suddenly too quiet house. I pushed myself up, determined to make those pancakes anyway. As I mixed the batter, my mind wandered to happier times, when this kitchen was filled with laughter and the smell of my late husband's famous blueberry muffins. The phone's shrill ring startled me out of my reverie. I answered, hoping to hear Wyatt's voice. "Lenora, it's Margie. You won't believe what I just saw." My old friend's tone sent a chill down my spine. "What is it, Margie?" "I was driving past that new cafe on Main Street, and I swear I saw Cora there with a man. They looked cozy." The bowl slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor and splattering batter everywhere. "What do you mean, cozy?" Margie's voice lowered. Holding hands across the table, he kissed her cheek when they got up to leave. My heart raced as I gripped the counter for support. There must be some explanation. Maybe it was a relative or... "Lenora, honey, I know what I saw, and the way he was looking at her. That was no relative." I sank to the floor, my legs no longer able to hold me up. "What do I do, Margie? Should I tell Wyatt?" "Not yet," she advised. "We need more proof. Can you check her phone or computer?" The thought of snooping made me uncomfortable, but the image of Cora with another man burned in my mind. "I'll see what I can find out." After hanging up, I slowly cleaned up the spilled batter, my thoughts in turmoil. How could Cora do this to Wyatt, to our family? Hours passed as I waited for her return, each minute stretching into an eternity. When I finally heard her key in the lock, I steeled myself for confrontation. Cora breezed in, shopping bags in hand. "Oh, you're still up," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Where were you?" I asked, hating how my voice shook. She raised an eyebrow. "I told you, running errands." "Why?" I took a deep breath. "Margie saw you at the cafe on Main Street, with a man." Cora's face hardened. "So you're spying on me now? Having your friends follow me around?" "That's not what happened." She cut me off, her voice ice cold. "I don't have to explain myself to you, Lenora. This is my house, and I'll come and go as I please." "This is Wyatt's house," I countered, finding my strength. "And mine. You're here because we welcomed you into our family." Cora laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Family? Is that what you call this prison? Living under your constant scrutiny, never good enough for your precious son?" She stormed upstairs, leaving me shaken and more certain than ever that something was terribly wrong. As I made my way to bed, one thought echoed in my mind. I had to protect Wyatt, no matter the cost. The next morning I woke with a sense of dread weighing heavily on my chest. Cora's words from the night before echoed in my mind as I slowly made my way downstairs. The house was eerily quiet. No sign of my daughter-in-law. I just settled at the kitchen table with a cup of tea when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Wyatt. "Landed safely, Mom. Miss you already. Give Cora a hug for me." My heart clenched. If only he knew. The day dragged on, each hour filled with worry and suspicion. By late afternoon, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. I needed to get out to clear my head. My physical therapy session wasn't until tomorrow, but a short walk might do me good. I grabbed my cane and headed for the front door, only to find it wouldn't budge. Frowning, I tried again, pushing harder this time. That's when I noticed the chain lock was engaged from the inside. "Cora?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Are you there? The door's locked." Silence. I knocked louder, panic rising in my throat. "Cora, please let me in." Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, Cora's face appearing in the narrow gap. Her eyes were cold, her lips pressed into a thin line. "What are you doing out there?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "I went for a walk," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is the chain on? I live here too, you know." Cora's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Do you? Sometimes I wonder. This is supposed to be my home, Lenora, my sanctuary, but with you here it feels like a prison." I recoiled as if she'd slapped me. "Cora, please, let's talk about this. We're family." "Family," she spat. "You're not my family. You're just a burden Wyatt refuses to let go of." With that, she slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, my hand still raised to knock. Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality of the situation hit me. I was locked out of my own home, rejected by the woman my son loved. My legs trembled, threatening to give out. I needed help. Fumbling with my phone, I called the only person I could think of. "Margie, it's Lenora. I need you." 20 minutes later, Margie's beat-up station wagon pulled into the driveway. She hurried over to me, her face etched with concern. "Oh, honey," she said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What happened?" Through tears, I recounted the events of the past 2 days. Cora's mysterious outing, our argument, and now this cruel lockout. Margie listened, her expression growing darker with each word. "That little witch," she muttered. "Come on, let's get you out of here. You can stay with me tonight." As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Cora watching from an upstairs window. The look on her face sent a chill down my spine. At Margie's cozy bungalow, I sank into her overstuffed couch, feeling utterly drained. My friend bustled about, making tea and muttering under her breath about ungrateful daughters-in-law. "What am I going to do, Margie?" I asked, my voice small and defeated. "I can't go back there, not after this." Margie sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. "We're going to fight, that's what. Cora can't treat you like this. It's time Wyatt knew the truth about his wife." I shook my head, fear gripping my heart. But what if he doesn't believe me? What if I lose him too? "Lenora, look at me," Margie said firmly. "Your son loves you. He deserves to know what's happening in his own home. We'll gather evidence, make sure he sees Cora for who she really is." As I nodded, a new determination sparked within me. Cora might have won this battle, but I wasn't about to let her destroy my family. Whatever it took, I would protect Wyatt and reclaim my place in our home. Little did I know, the war was just beginning. I woke up on Margie's couch, disoriented and stiff. For a moment, I forgot why I was there. Then it all came rushing back. Cora's betrayal, the locked door, the cruel words. My heart sank as I realized this wasn't just a bad dream. Margie bustled into the living room, a steaming mug of coffee in each hand. "How are you holding up, honey?" she asked, handing me a cup. I took a sip, grateful for the warmth. "I've been better," I admitted. "I just can't believe this is happening." Margie sat beside me, her face set with determination. "We need to tell Wyatt what's going on. He deserves to know the truth about Cora." The thought of breaking my son's heart made me nauseous. But what if he doesn't believe me? What if I lose him too? "Lenora," Margie said firmly, "your son loves you. He needs to know what's happening in his own home. We'll gather evidence, make sure he sees Cora for who she really is." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "You're right. I can't let her get away with this." We spent the morning strategizing. Margie suggested we drive by the house to see if Cora was up to anything suspicious. As we pulled onto my street, my heart raced. There, in the driveway, was a sleek sports car I didn't recognize. "That's him," I whispered, my hands shaking. "That's the man Cora was with at the cafe." Margie's eyes narrowed. "Got you now, you little home wrecker," she muttered, pulling out her phone to snap a few pictures. We watched as Cora emerged from the house, laughing and hanging on the mystery man's arm. The sight of her so carefree while my world was crumbling made my blood boil. "I need to call Wyatt," I said, my voice trembling. "He needs to know." Back at Margie's, I paced the living room, phone in hand. Finally, I gathered my courage and dialed. "Mom?" Wyatt's voice was warm, concerned. "Is everything okay? You never call during my trips." I took a deep breath. "Wyatt, honey, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Cora." "What about her? Is she all right?" The worry in his voice nearly broke me. "She's fine, but, Wyatt, she's been seeing someone else. I saw her with him today at our house." Silence. Then, "What are you talking about, Mom? That's impossible. Cora would never—" "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I interrupted, my voice cracking. "But it's true. Margie saw them together at a cafe, and today we saw his car in the driveway. I have pictures." I heard Wyatt's sharp intake of breath. "No," he whispered. "No, there has to be some mistake." "I wish there was," I said softly. "But Wyatt, there's more. Cora locked me out of the house yesterday. She said I was a burden, that living with me was unbearable." The line went quiet for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then Wyatt's voice came back, hard and cold. "I'm coming home. Now, don't confront her, Mom. Just stay with Margie. I'll be there as soon as I can." After we hung up, I collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained. Margie sat beside me, rubbing my back soothingly. "You did the right thing," she assured me. "Wyatt needed to know." I nodded, but guilt gnawed at me. Had I just destroyed my son's marriage? What if I was wrong about everything? As if reading my thoughts, Margie squeezed my hand. "Don't you dare start doubting yourself, Lenora. We both know what we saw. Cora made her bed. Now she has to lie in it." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Cora. "Where are you? Come home now. We need to talk." I showed Margie the message, my hands shaking. "What do I do?" Margie's eyes flashed with anger. "You stay right here. That woman doesn't get to order you around anymore. Let her stew until Wyatt gets home." As I settled in for an agonizing wait, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before the storm. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The early morning sun barely peeked through the curtains as I sat in my living room, my heart pounding. Wyatt had arrived late last night, his face a mask of pain and anger. Now we waited for Cora to return from wherever she'd spent the night. Margie sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm that was about to break. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mom?" Wyatt asked, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. I reached out and squeezed his hand. "We have to, honey. Cora needs to face what she's done." The sound of a key in the lock made us all freeze. Cora walked in, her eyes widening as she took in the scene before her. "Wyatt? What are you doing home?" My son stood, his shoulders tense. "I think you know why I'm here, Cora." She glanced at me, her expression hardening. "What lies has she been telling you?" "They're not lies," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We saw you with him, Cora, at the cafe and here at the house." Cora's face paled, but she quickly recovered. "So you've been spying on me? That's rich, coming from you, Lenora." Wyatt stepped between us. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on my mother. I saw the pictures. Cora, I know everything." Just then, a car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I saw a man get out, the same one from the cafe. My breath caught in my throat as he approached the front door. "Who's that?" Wyatt demanded, his voice dangerously low. Cora's eyes darted between Wyatt and the door. It's not what you think." The doorbell rang, shattering the tense silence. Wyatt strode to the door and yanked it open. "Who the hell are you?" The man looked startled. I'm here to see Cora. Is she home?" "Oh, she's home all right," Wyatt growled, grabbing the man's collar and dragging him inside. "Now, both of you are going to explain what's going on." Cora's face crumpled. "Wyatt, please, I can explain." "Then start talking," he snapped. What followed was a painful confession. Cora admitted to the affair, tears streaming down her face as she detailed her unhappiness in the marriage. She claimed Wyatt was never home, always working, and that living with me was suffocating her. "You're never here," Cora cried. "Living with your mother is unbearable. I felt so alone, so trapped." Wyatt's face was a storm of emotions. "So instead of talking to me, you decided to cheat? To treat my mother like garbage?" The other man, who introduced himself as David, looked uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't know she was married. Cora told me she was divorced." I watched as my son's world crumbled around him. The pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. "I want you both out of my house," Wyatt said, his voice eerily calm. "Now." Cora reached for him. "Wyatt, please, we can work this out." He jerked away from her touch. "There's nothing to work out. We're done, Cora. I want a separation." As Cora and David left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Wyatt collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. I moved to comfort him, but he stood abruptly. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. "Wyatt, wait," I called, but he was already gone. Margie put her arm around me. "Give him time, Lenora. He's been through a lot." I nodded, fighting back tears. We'd won in a way. The truth was out, Cora's betrayal exposed, but looking at the wreckage of my son's marriage, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our shattered family, I knew one thing for certain: the real battle was just beginning. Somehow, I had to find a way to help Wyatt heal, to rebuild our lives from the ashes of Cora's betrayal. And deep down, a part of me whispered that this wasn't over. Cora wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The days following Cora's departure were a blur of pain and confusion. Wyatt moved through the house like a ghost, barely speaking, his eyes hollow. I ached to comfort him, but every attempt seemed to push him further away. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of papers. "Wyatt?" I asked gently. "What are those?" He looked up, his face a mask of anguish. "Divorce papers. Cora's lawyer sent them over." My heart sank. Despite everything, a small part of me had hoped they might reconcile. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Wyatt's laugh was bitter. "Don't be. You were right about her all along." I reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door. As it slammed behind him, I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't let Cora destroy my son like this. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence of her betrayal. I called Margie, and together we hatched a plan. We'd go to the cafe where Cora and David often met, hoping to catch them in the act. The next afternoon found us huddled in a corner booth, nervously sipping coffee. "Are you sure about this, Lenora?" Margie whispered. Before I could answer, the bell above the door chimed. My breath caught as Cora walked in, followed closely by David. They settled at a table across the room, oblivious to our presence. Margie squeezed my hand. "Now's our chance," she said, pulling out her phone. We watched in stunned silence as Cora leaned in, kissing David passionately. Margie's camera clicked furiously, capturing every damning moment. Suddenly, Cora's eyes met mine, her face contorted with rage as she stormed over to our table. "You miserable old hag," she hissed. "Can't you just leave me alone?" I stood, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. "You're the one who needs to leave us alone, Cora. You've hurt Wyatt enough." She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Hurt him? Please. I set him free. He was suffocating, tied to you in that house. You can't prove anything, Lenora. This is all your fault." Something in me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "My fault? You're the one who cheated, who lied, who treated my son like garbage, and now we have proof." I gestured to Margie's phone, and Cora's face paled. She lunged for it, but Margie was quicker, snatching it away. "It's over, Cora," I said firmly. "Go live your life, but leave my family alone." As Cora stormed out, David trailing behind her, I collapsed back into the booth, exhausted but triumphant. Back at home, I showed Wyatt the pictures. His face crumpled as he scrolled through them, each image a fresh wound. "I can't believe she'd do this," he whispered. I wrapped my arms around him, and this time he didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but now you know the truth." Wyatt nodded, wiping his eyes. "You're right. I need to end this for good." Together we packed up the last of Cora's belongings. As Wyatt carried the boxes to the porch, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We were finally free of her toxicity. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read Cora's words. "This isn't over, Lenora. You'll regret crossing me." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Cora's threat hung in the air, a dark cloud over our fragile peace. I knew then that this battle was far from over. The question was, how far was I willing to go to protect my son and our family? As I drifted off to sleep, one thought crystallized in my mind. Whatever Cora had planned, I would be ready. This time I wouldn't let her catch us off guard. The war might not be over, but I was determined to win. Weeks passed, and slowly, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Wyatt threw himself into work, often coming home late, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I tried to give him space, but my heart ached to see him so broken. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Wyatt stumbled through the door, his tie askew and eyes red-rimmed. "Wyatt?" I asked, alarmed. "What's wrong?" He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "I saw Cora today," he mumbled. She looked happy, Mom, with him." I felt a surge of anger. How dare she flaunt her new relationship when my son was still in pieces? But I pushed it down, focusing on Wyatt. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, wrapping my arms around him. "I'm so sorry." He leaned into me, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In that moment, I made a decision. We couldn't keep living like this, trapped in the shadow of Cora's betrayal. The next morning, I called Margie. "We need to do something," I told her. "Wyatt's falling apart, and I can't just stand by and watch." Margie agreed to come over, and soon we were brainstorming ways to help Wyatt move on. As we talked, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I might not be able to mend my son's broken heart, but I could damn well try to make his life easier. We decided to start small. Margie and I began inviting Wyatt to join us for dinners, game nights, anything to get him out of the house and his own head. At first, he resisted, but slowly I saw glimpses of my old Wyatt returning. One Saturday, as we worked together in the garden, something we hadn't done since before his marriage, Wyatt turned to me with a small smile. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly, "for everything." I felt my heart swell with love and pride. We were going to be okay. But just as things were looking up, disaster struck. I was in the kitchen when I heard a crash from the living room. I rushed in to find Wyatt on the floor, clutching his ankle, his face contorted in pain. "What happened?" I cried, kneeling beside him. "Tripped," he gasped. "I think it's broken." The next few hours were a blur of ambulances and emergency rooms. As we waited for the doctor, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Cora. "Heard about Wyatt. Guess you can't take care of him after all. Maybe he needs his wife back." I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. How dare she? And how did she even know? Before I could respond, the doctor arrived with the verdict. Wyatt's ankle was indeed broken. He'd need surgery and weeks of recovery. As we drove home, Wyatt silent and brooding in the passenger seat, I felt a wave of panic. How was I going to manage this? My own mobility was still limited from the stroke. How could I care for Wyatt and keep up with the house? That night, as Wyatt slept fitfully upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table, feeling more overwhelmed than I had in years. Cora's text haunted me. Was she right? Was I not enough for Wyatt? Just then, my phone lit up with another message. It was Margie. "Heard about Wyatt. I'm coming over first thing tomorrow. We'll figure this out together." I felt tears prick my eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. We weren't alone in this. As I climbed the stairs to check on Wyatt, I steeled myself for the challenges ahead. Cora might think she'd won, that she could swoop in and reclaim her place in Wyatt's life, but she was wrong. We'd weathered storms before, Wyatt and I, and we'd weather this one too, together. But as I drifted off to sleep, a nagging worry gnawed at the edges of my mind. What if Cora was right? What if I wasn't enough? The coming days would test us all, and I prayed I had the strength to see us through. The weeks following Wyatt's accident were a blur of doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, and sleepless nights. I pushed myself to the limit, determined to prove Cora wrong. I could take care of my son. I had to. One morning, as I struggled to help Wyatt down the stairs, my own legs trembling with the effort, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the hallway mirror. We looked exhausted, defeated. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I really helping, or just making things worse? "Mom," Wyatt said softly, "maybe we should hire some help." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "We're managing just fine, honey. I've got this." But the truth was, I didn't have it. Not even close. That afternoon, I had my own physical therapy appointment. As I worked through my exercises, my therapist, Sarah, noticed my distraction. "Lenora," she said gently, "you're pushing yourself too hard. Your progress has been amazing, but if you don't take care of yourself, you'll end up back where you started." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I don't have a choice," I whispered. "Wyatt needs me." Sarah squeezed my hand. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Lenora. It's okay to ask for help." As I left the clinic, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Heard Wyatt's not doing so well. Maybe he needs his wife back. I can take better care of him than you ever could." My blood ran cold. Cora. I was so distracted by the message that I didn't notice the car speeding through the parking lot. I froze, my cane slipping on the wet pavement. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back just as the car whizzed by. "Mrs. Henderson, are you all right?" I looked up to see David, Cora's former lover, of all people. He steadied me, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," I stammered, pulling away. "What are you doing here?" He looked sheepish. I've been meaning to talk to you about Cora." My heart raced. "What about her?" "She's been acting strange lately, talking about getting Wyatt back, no matter what it takes. I think she might do something drastic." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Margie, her voice frantic. "Lenora, you need to get home now. Cora's here and she's demanding to see Wyatt." Panic surged through me. "Don't let her in. I'm on my way." I turned to David. "I need a ride. Now." The drive home was agonizing. Every red light felt like an eternity. When we finally pulled up, I saw Cora's car in the driveway, Margie standing on the porch, blocking the door. I rushed out, my legs shaky but fueled by adrenaline. "Cora," I shouted. "Get away from my house." She whirled around, her eyes wild. "You can't keep me from him, Lenora. Wyatt needs me." "He doesn't need you," I spat. "He needs peace and healing, something you've never given him." Cora lunged forward, but David caught her arm. "Enough, Cora. It's over." She wrenched away from him, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. None of you do. I love him." "If you loved him," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "you would let him go." For a moment, Cora seemed to deflate. Then, without warning, she shoved past me, racing for the door. I stumbled, my cane clattering to the ground. "Mom." Wyatt's voice came from inside. He appeared in the doorway, balancing on his crutches, his face a mask of shock and anger. As Cora reached for him, I found strength I didn't know I had. I pushed myself up, stepping between them. "You can't break us," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "We're stronger without you." Wyatt's hand found mine, squeezing tight. We stood united, facing Cora together. In that moment, I knew we'd reached a turning point. Whatever happened next would define our future. And I was ready to fight for it with everything I had. 6 months had passed since that fateful confrontation with Cora. The leaves were turning golden, a crisp autumn breeze rustling through the trees as Margie and I strolled through the park. My cane was gone, replaced by a newfound strength and balance I'd worked hard to achieve. "I can't believe how far you've come, Lenora," Margie said, beaming with pride. "You're practically running circles around me now." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I couldn't have done it without you, Margie. You've been my rock through all of this." As we rounded a corner, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench ahead. My heart skipped a beat. It was Cora. She looked different, thinner, more subdued. When she saw us, her eyes widened with recognition. For a moment, I thought about turning away, avoiding the confrontation. But something in me had changed. I was no longer afraid. "Hello, Cora," I said as we approached. She stood, wringing her hands nervously. "Lenora, I've been hoping to run into you." Margie squeezed my arm supportively as Cora continued. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. I was selfish and cruel, and I hurt you both so much. I took a deep breath, surprised by the calm that washed over me. Thank you for saying that, Cora. It means a lot to hear it. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. How is Wyatt? He's doing well, I replied. He's found his footing again. We both have. Cora smiled sadly. I'm glad. You both deserve happiness. As we parted ways, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the last remnants of anger and resentment finally fading away. Later that evening, Wyatt and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. He'd just returned from a successful business trip, his confidence restored and his smile genuine once again. I saw Cora today, I said softly. Wyatt tensed for a moment, then relaxed. How was that? Surprisingly healing, I admitted. She apologized. I think she's finally found some peace. Wyatt nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how you stood by me through everything. I reached out, squeezing his hand. That's what family does, sweetheart. I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But it's more than that. You taught me what real strength looks like, what unconditional love really means. Tears welled in my eyes as Wyatt continued. I've decided to cut back on work, he said. I want to spend more time here with you. Maybe we could start having those Sunday dinners again, like when Dad was alive. My heart swelled with joy. I'd love that, Wyatt. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I marveled at how far we'd come. The road had been rocky, filled with pain and betrayal, but we'd emerged stronger, our bond unbreakable. We've endured so much, I said, my voice filled with wonder, but we've emerged stronger. Wyatt smiled, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. That's because we had each other, Mom, and we always will. Just then, Margie's car pulled into the driveway. She waved cheerfully, a bag of takeout in her hand. Hope you two are hungry, she called out. I brought enough for an army. As we laughed and welcomed Margie onto the porch, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm, faced our demons, and come out the other side. Our family might look different now, but it was stronger than ever. Friendship and family, I realized, were our greatest strengths. They had carried us through the darkest times and would continue to light our way forward. As we settled in for an evening of good food and even better company, I knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, we would face them together. And that was all that mattered.